today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about how to not be unworthy, but it's really about worthiness. And there's being a human being is like being in a box and the instructions on how to get out are on the outside. You got to have somebody who understands the box and who can read the instructions.
Well, I know for me, I always thought that men had more self-worth, which is probably why I went that way. Because men in the 80s and 90s and 2000s had more power.
Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I am your host, Rich Heller, and today we are going to meet with a new friend, Diane Lang, who has published a book on, you think when you look at the book, it's about how to not be unworthy, but it's really about worthiness. And it's so deep, and I'm not going to give it all away. But just so Diane is a widely recognized speaker, author and educator, counselor, and certified positive psychology coach with 2 decades of experience. And she's got a really impressive bio, but I'm going to just let her presence and her words impress you and speak for itself. How you doing, Diane?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So I am curious, the work that this book, actually, Diane's got I think 3 books that she's written on her own and one that you wrote with somebody else. Is that right?
No, I have 4 books, but 3 were academically published, and this one is a traditionally published book. So it's first traditional.
I thought I saw one title that you co-authored with somebody, but maybe that was a different Diane Lang. And I've read actually 2 of them. Thank you for sharing them with me. But this book is really outstanding because, Diane, I feel like it speaks to what we like to call in Rich in Relationship, the human condition, right? Yeah. The human condition seems to be in some way, shape, or form, we realize that we're imperfect, gasp, and it brings up the feelings of not enough or am I really worthy? And this book so explores that. And I'm curious, how did your heart lead you into this work?
Honestly, being down that road, I always consider myself a recovering people pleaser. And that comes from years ago, from childhood, where I had a dysfunctional childhood, brought that with me into the middle school and high school years, which are traumatic enough just with puberty and finding out who you are, right? The identity confusion stage. But even as I got older, I realized I was just holding on to it. And I got to a place where I looked back at my life and I realized how much I didn't do, even though I wanted to, because I had so much fear of not being good enough, not being lovable, being unworthy. And then working in the field for so long, I realized that so many people, the root of every issue is that unworthiness, that feeling that they're not good enough. And it shows up differently for everybody. But I realized how much I dealt with it. And even though I am in my 50s and I got to get rid of those 2 decades, it makes me feel old when people read my bio. But when I realized that I still have triggers and things that bring me back, do I get through it quicker? Am I more self-aware, more resilient? Absolutely. But it's just going to be a piece of me. And like you said, it's just part of being human that we're going to have that. And whether it shows up as perfectionism, imposter syndrome, good girl syndrome, people pleasing, it does for so many of us.
Very well said. And one of the things I loved about your book is that it isn't an academic work. It definitely has academic qualities, but you share so much of yourself and give the reader the opportunity to go, oh my God, that's harsh. Or, wow, I know what that feels like, or whatever the reaction is. But there's like a window into your heart for this work. And I guess I'm going to put a frame on this sense of not enough, or really how to feel worthy. I have value. It's been played up on in our culture for probably thousands of years, but with the emergence of screens and the evolution of screens, from television to things that we have in our pocket that we can pull out whenever we want, it's played on more and more. We're all so manipulated by this sense or need. And so the awareness of it is more important than ever. That's the 10,000 foot. This is why this is so important. It isn't just that as individuals, we want to feel like we have worth, but it's that as self-determining creatures, our ability to self-determine becomes more and more limited the more unconscious we are about this. So, what you shared in your book is about how for you personally, some of the experiences, I'm going to put this in the most general frame so that everyone gets it. The experience of growing up with parents who have not yet perfected how to love. That's probably the best way to put it, right?
It's the most polite way to put it.
But that's everyone, right? No matter how not dysfunctional you think your household is, we're all perfecting how to love. We've all got these sides where I am fond of saying every kid needs a therapist, right? So no matter how good the household is, every kid needs a therapist. And that's because there's this human condition where we're transferring this not enough or unworthy or whatever you want to call it, from generation to generation. And what I love about your book is that it opens up the door to, hey, we could heal this. Right? It doesn't have to be this way. So that's my big frame on this. I'm curious, how did there you grew up in this very tough environment, and I invite you to share as little or as much as you want about it. How did you move from that environment to this place of empowerment where you're helping other people and where you're speaking on this subject and where you're moving into a space of feeling adequate and worthy? And
It's been a very long journey. I wish I could say it was an overnight experience, but it was definitely a very long journey. As I said, I'm still sometimes dealing with it and having triggers, which again is very normal and natural. But, as some of my clients will say, how long is this going to go on for? And I'm like, well, probably the rest of your life. But again, the self-awareness is there this time. You get over it quicker. You're more resilient. You have enough tools in your emotional toolbox to pull out to know what to use. But for me, I think the journey really started for me when my brother, who was like my father for me, moved out of the house. And rightly so, everybody was way older than me. I was an oops baby, had to move on with his life. And it really devastated me because is where I felt completely alone because my parents were just not there, very neglectful, just didn't have it in them. And you're right, it's a learned behavior. I'm not excusing behavior, but I know that they got it from their own parents. And, it's just spread down the line. It's that learned behavior that we either end up following in or we choose to go, I don't want to do that, which is what I chose to do with my own child is I don't want to be what my parents were. And I'm going to make that change. I'm nowhere near a perfect parent, but I'd made the changes that were necessary for me to be a healthy parent because there is no perfect parent and it's not something we should strive to. We're all humans. But when that happened, it really set me for a loop. And I probably stayed in that very unhealthy space until my father passed away when I was 25. And that set me into a loop of, okay, you know what? I really got to do something here because I'm either going to end up on drugs or alcohol, going down a very bad path, which I almost did, or I'm going to get better. And I put myself in counseling at the same time as going to graduate school for counseling. And I always tell my students this, if you're in graduate school, it's like the most expensive form of counseling. At the same time, I'm going to counseling. And it really was an experience that shifted me. But again, even when I graduated and I started working in the field in my 30s, I still remember having this experience that every time somebody would say something to me, which I didn't realize until hindsight, I would always say, what do you think? I'm stupid? And my husband said something to me in my 30s and we had a fight. Don't even remember what the fight was about because probably wasn't even relevant for what this is. But he said, I turned around and I always put my hands over my chest and I put my foot out and I go, what do you think? I'm stupid? And he stopped me and he said, I don't know why you do that. Every time you have a fight with me, you ask me if I think you're stupid. He's like, I've never called you stupid. I don't think you're stupid. Where's this come from? And then I talked to my family and my brothers and my sisters, and I started realizing that I have been saying that forever because since my earliest memories, which is usually for people anywhere between like 2 and 4, and mine probably was around there, it was always, you're so stupid. Why you're so stupid? That's all I ever heard from my father. And it stuck with me, which is part of the reason of that unworthiness. And I have to say, at 3, 4 years old, back in the 70s, just showed my age really bad. If you went to nursery school, it was an academic. It was playtime, nap time, songs, and you went home. There was nothing. My milestones were right on time with everything, but it stayed with me forever. And that became part of my identity. And that was the first awareness of, oh my God, look how much I do feel that I'm stupid with everything. And it stopped me from so many things when I look back. So that's what I mean. It's such a journey. I went for counseling in my 20s, went to grad school, then did this in my 30s, and then I've had other triggers. So It's a journey.
There's
I could say it was easier.
there's so much in that. Let's unpack that a little, if that's okay with. All
Absolutely.
right. So it sounds like the first part is realizing that we all have some, and you talk about this in the book pretty extensively, some programming or unconscious beliefs, and maybe even some stored emotions that come from growing up with these parents. They just have no clue, or they're misguided on how, in some ways, on how to love us, right? And obviously, your parents must be okay because you came out, you all right. They gave you some positive programming too because you're here, right? And on the other end of it, this is what I tell myself, by the way. All right. So we all, what the audience probably knows, because we've talked about this a lot, is from 0 to 7, all the unconscious programming, our emotional operating system is laid in. And so if you got a parent who's saying something to you repeatedly, that's in there. And what you just shared was, yeah, there's this thing about, what do you think? I'm stupid. And, I know from personal experience, or in my case, it was, what are you, an idiot? And so I was constantly proving that I wasn't an idiot. And that's why I have all these freaking certificates and diplomas back here, is because I was going to show them how smart I was. But no matter how many diplomas I had, I never felt smart until I dealt with the root cause. And so I think the first part is a way that this sense of inadequacy can show up is that we'll overcompensate, but it never really gets rid of the feeling. Another way we can deal with it always is more like what you did. It's like, oh, what is this programming? So I'm curious, how did when your husband brought this up and you sort of had this, gee, why am I saying that moment? How did you unpack that? How did you diminish its impact? How did, what are the next steps?
Well, first, I love that you brought up something that a lot of people don't know. We get most of those belief systems or downloaded programs between birth and about 7, 8 years old. So you could be in your 30s, 40s, 50s and just dealing with it. But it's like a downloaded computer program. It's been there for so long that it's autopilot. You don't even hear it anymore. You just act that way and feel that way. So when it finally came up and I had that aha moment, I really did like what we do in, sessions. I fact checked everything, because your belief systems are something you heard over and over again. It doesn't mean it's true, or that it's based on fact, or that it's not old or outdated or limiting or even serving you in any positive way. So I literally sat down with pen and paper and was like, what proves that I'm not stupid? Like, went to grad school, got a 3.9 GPA, got into grad school, paid for it myself, like everything I did that validated how I really am not that. And I'm a professor. I haven't met many stupid professors, like everything I was doing was saying,
I have.
all right, well, that's a whole different conversation. I'd have to come back for
Another podcast. But I don't think you're one of them. I'm just going to say.
But emotionally, might be common sense wise, but usually academically. But like for me, it was really just writing it down and looking at it from a different perspective, because my perspective was always so biased of, I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, they're going to know that something's wrong at work, and I'm going to have imposter syndrome. And I always went down that path. And I did similar to you. When I went to grad school, I applied because my father didn't think I could do it. And before he passed away, the first 2 semesters, because again, back then you got your report card mailed to you, I would still put it on the refrigerator. It'd be like, screw you, look at that. I got all A's and I'm paying for it and I'm working full time and you didn't think I could do it. And in one way, I can look at that as a positive because that negativity motivated me. But in general, I look back and I don't have any of those positive. Like you said, there must be something positive in the family that turned out. I really think my brother made me. Like, I think of this with people. If you come from one parent that was able to give love and healthy, you have a better chance. When you were both, like I did, where they didn't love you, and I was an oops baby. The other brothers and sisters had a totally different upbringing and family like than I did, because I was the one not wanted. But if he wasn't there, I don't know what would have happened. But we have one person, whether it's a coach, a teacher, somebody else's friends, parents who take you on, you need somebody to guide you. And I think that was my saving grace, to be able to make that decision of, I got to live. I don't want to go down this path.
So it sounds like the first step for you was, all right, let's look at this belief that I've been saying over and over without thinking about it, and really approach it cognitively. Let's look at all the ways that I've shown that I am intelligent, I actually kind of love showing it to dad. It's kind of like in the face of the programmer. Hey, That you know what I don't know what you meant by that, but let me demonstrate what it's not. All right, I am an intelligent human being. And I also loved the next step, which is it sounds like you reached out for mentors and guides or Sherpas or help with this. It sounds like that's really important. Also, it's kind of like they say, kids don't do this at home alone.
No, everybody needs help. You can't grieve, forgive, heal, process alone. We really need other people. And whether you go to a professional, social worker, counselor, psychologist, or you find another mentor.
Yogi, but they need to have some experience and understanding. Uh, They might have personal experience, or they might have training, or ideally, they're going to have both. So that they can help you with this. But is somebody once said to me, being a human being is like being in a box, and the instructions on how to get out are on the outside. You got to have somebody who understands the box and who can read the instructions.
That is a perfect way of thinking of it.
So how about the emotional side of this, though? You talk in your book a great deal about the belief side of it, and we've talked a lot about cognitively how to go at it, but there's a whole emotional component to it. At the end of the book, you said to me, you said to me, you said to all of us,
To you,
you said just to me because I was reading it.
just to Rich. That's
At
right.
the end of the book, you said to Rich and all the other readers that, yeah, you know what? Some of the trauma, lowercase t or uppercase t, like PTSD would be uppercase t. Lowercase t would be someone says something to you over and over and over, and you internalize it, and it feels yucky, and it kind of gets stuck. These things that get stuck, it can still be painful, but it becomes less and less. And I'm curious, about the emotional part because we can't really let go of a belief unless we remove the supporting emotions.
Yeah, it's really feeling your emotions as much as it's going to be really uncomfortable and awkward feeling. It's really just feeling them. Even when I did the fact checking, that allowed me to see it from a different perspective. But I had to bring everything up because I pushed it down so far out of the feeling of like guilt and shame. But just taking it out to the surface, sitting with it, sharing with somebody you trust, obviously, very unconditional love there, actually takes away a lot of that power. And that's one of the first things I've seen with clients as well as myself. When it first came out and I just shared it, and I just had a client do the same experience. She just let everything out. And she's like, holy shit, excuse my language, but she's like, I can't believe how much I was holding on to. And it just feels like the weight comes off. And not that you still don't have work to do, but that's like one of the first places because you hold it in and then you just put more crap on top of it that just validates your unworthiness. But once you let it out and it gets to the surface and reaches the air, it doesn't feel as powerful anymore. And then you could start feeling what you're feeling both physically, 'cause it comes up physically on your body, like you said, you hold that trauma in your body, and emotionally, and start releasing it in healthy ways. But that was the first step I know for me, and I've seen it with other clients. And I don't want to just say females because I have a lot of male clients, and it's the same. Even though in the book I say women deal with this a little more often. And I have to say women are raised as caregivers, which is the difference. We're raised as nurturers and to make sure everybody else is happy, where men are raised differently. And I'm going a little old school. I knew the new generation, Gen Z and Alpha, will be raised differently. But for a lot of us millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, we were raised in very differently. But once they release it and get it out there, it's like a relief. And then it opens the floodgates to start talking and healing.
Really interesting. In your book, you mentioned that in your experience, you seem to be seeing less men with this, but you also say that you talked about this. Really stood out to me how some of the men you work with talk about sharing their emotions as being kind of feminine, and they're not really comfortable with it. And I'm wondering how those things may be linked, because truthfully, whether you are no matter what gender your body is, and your brain evolves in a certain chemical soup that body has, regardless of what gender you feel like you are, or your genetic gender is going to have certain wiring. It's going to have a certain impact, and regardless of whether you are male or female in any sense of the word, you still have the same. I'm editing my language here. Upside down. I think you like might have been the words I wanted to use, but they're the same upside down parents. And so it's not like men are immune to this. I would argue, in fact, we all have this on us. It's maybe expressed a little differently. So I'm kind of curious, what you think about these two pieces that I pulled out of the book about men and emotion, and men don't seem to talk about their sense of worthy or less than as much.
Yeah. You know, it's funny when I first started in the field where I was doing offering like workshops and classes, I would always have predominantly like 80 to 90% females and some men. And a lot of times the men were taken by the woman, like the wife, the girlfriend made them come. Then I taught an anger management class and I walked in and there was not one female. It's because for men, anger was an appropriate emotion. Men can feel that. And women are the opposite. They shouldn't feel angry. They should be more polite. And again, yes, we're in a different society today, and you don't, whatever your gender is, doesn't mean you feel that way. But
It's
in general,
and it's not that different. We talk about being in a different society, and women have almost reached pay equity with men, but there's still a lot of effed up stuff, effed up stuff going on in our culture. And let's talk
100%,
about that thing more, right? If you are a woman and you show up as strong, the first thing the guys will say in the business world is what,
you're a bitch.
right? But if you're an angry guy, what are you?
No, that's normal.
You're a freaking leader.
Well, it's funny. I always teach this with nonverbal. When you come up to a class, let's say classroom, or you're at a business meeting, a guy comes up and he just talks. No one says anything. If a woman comes up, she literally stamps her foot out and puts it to the side because she's demanding power. She's demanding that she's here. And again, whatever gender you are, we still have gender roles and we have expectations for male or female. And when a woman comes up and she's a woman boss, she's a bitch. When a man does right, he's a leader. And there's still some of that, and there's still stereotyping for men where talking about anger is normal, talking about sadness with grief of losing a parent or a child is normal, but other things are not, and it takes away their masculinity. And by saying, I feel like a woman or I feel feminine, talking about this is showing that they feel that it's a sign of weakness for them,
So let's
which is not
let's
true.
let's take this back to the book, right? Because I could do this conversation. I could do 10 podcasts on this one right here, and I have. But I think what I want to point out here is that I think the reason why men don't own up to that sense of lack of worth as much, and maybe I might even be speaking from personal experience, is when the only emotions that are available to us are, oh gee, we lost someone, and anger. There's more emotion available than that, but intense anger,
Right.
uh, or being completely emotionally shut down. When that's what's available, anger feels super empowering. You're beyond worthy when you're angry. You're like, if you're really in, it isn't until
It's like
afterwards.
a sense of control when you're
Or
in.
until it isn't until afterwards when you come down off of the cortisol and the adrenaline and the rush of being so right, and the power that you feel in your body, you go, "Oh my god, what did I do?" And in that moment, you might go, "Oh, I'm such a piece of crap." But that is not your men tend to encapsulate that stuff. Right? Like I think men have become really good at encapsulating emotions, and the reason why it's either volcano or shutdown for many men, not all men, is because
Of course.
it's that cycle right there. So my point being, I think part of what drives that is that sense of unworthiness or not enough, and just like I compensated for, "What are you, an idiot?" with, lots of education, men compensate for not enough with, "I'm gonna go out and I'm accomplish, and I'm gonna succeed, and when anything that gets in my way, I'm gonna blow through it. That's how I'm gonna prove I'm enough." And then it does not matter, though, how big the corporation is, you need to be into a bigger one. It doesn't matter how much money you're making, you gotta make more. It doesn't matter how big the house is, it doesn't matter how big the car is.
Well, that's
Eventually, they lose sight of everything that's really important. Their wives, their family, themselves, because how fulfilled can you feel in that? And I think that's all driven by that, and breaking through that shield, with guys can be really challenging.
it could be really challenging, but I have to say since COVID, where we've seen a shift with mental health and reducing the stigma of it, I definitely have a lot more male clients. And again, I've also noticed coaching wise, you get more male clients because coaching is more acceptable than going to counseling. But being a coach with a counseling background, you'll hear a lot of stuff that comes that way. And it's really important that men realize that it's normal to feel emotions and it's normal to express them. And it's not a sign of weakness. I actually find it to be a sense of of strength. If you can show your emotions and you can express how you feel and communicate, that's how you have the healthiest relationships and you teach your kids to do that. And we want a role model for our kids that communication is so important. So I'm kind of not happy that COVID happened, but that it shifted, how we feel about mental health and made it more okay to go or okay to be not okay, even for men. And now I'm seeing men open up a little more, realizing that it's okay not to be okay, to have a bad experience, to have had a bad life, to have a bad day and to feel more than anger. But then there's also the female side too. I've had female clients say, "Oh, my husband cried. Such a girl." And I'm like, okay, we can't have it both ways either. If you want your man to express himself and to be himself, it can't be certain times it's okay for him to cry and other times where it's not. Like you can't judge. So it's a two-way street here. Because again, a lot of us have this description in our head of what a male or female is supposed to be. Again, you have to let kind of that go and just look at people for who they are individually and accepting them for who they are. But that's a hard thing to do. A lot of us are kind of trained in other ways.
This is a huge thing you've opened up here. The fact that we're human beings first with a full range of emotions. And then there's masculinity as it expresses itself, as it expresses itself. All right. I want to be really clear about that. It's not unique to, but as it expresses itself in a body that's genetically male. And there's femininity also, but we're human beings first. And emotion is an expression of motion is normal and natural to both of those genders,
Absolutely.
those body types. And, we men have, because we are raised in a culture where there are men and women, we have a whole feminine side that we evolve. We have a mother, we internalize our mother and women internalize their father. So, it's emotionally so much deeper than that. But what I really love about this is you're bringing out that the culture is changing, but our concept of how to apply what it means to be masculine and feminine is not always keeping up with it. All right. And I think that this is really important. I'm going to make a plug here. I'm in the middle of editing a book I've written on men, masculinity, and marriage. Right. And by the way, if anyone is interested in this topic or wants to give me input on it, I'm wide open here. I love to hear from people who are interested in this topic and want to speak to it. And maybe they want to be first readers, reach out to me. But I feel like this topic of the truth is that masculinity, the qualities of the what's genetically imprinted on us, that doesn't change. Or femininity, that doesn't change. It's how what's appropriate expression of it is what changes. And so, like for example, in today's culture, it is appropriate for women to yell and scream in a public place, but if a man yells and screams, it's bad news right away, right? Right. I've had personal experience with this. I've had experience where a woman was yelling at me, and I yelled back, and immediately I was a pariah. And I was like, this was like a big aha for me. It's like, oh, you know what? The rules are changing, and I'm not calling that out like it's bad. I'm calling that out like, as men, we need to be aware that that there's a reason for that. That we have been scary and bullying for thousands of years, and even though I don't carry the burden of all the behaviors of all the men before me, I do get to pay the price for it. And the road through it is what you're talking about. The road through it is emotional awareness. The road through it is knowing how to handle somebody yelling at you without yelling back. There's 110 ways that I could have handled that situation differently. And in that context more appropriately. Right. And I think this is the challenge for all of us is, all right, so what does it mean to be a man today? A man, what does it mean to be a man today? This whole thing of 26 genders always throws me for a loop, right? You want to be PC and honor people's experience, but what does it mean to be a man today? And what does it mean to be a woman today? And how do you express that appropriately?
And you know what? I don't know if there is a full appropriate because we all have different definitions of it. And I know growing up, I've always been told that I'm like a guy because I've always felt more in that sense. I love being a woman, but I always related more to men. I didn't have a dream of getting married. I wanted to have a career. I want to watch football. I like drinking beer. I don't care. I didn't even look at my house before we bought it. I didn't care. So
Funny. I don't like watching football, and I seem more like a woman.
Right, but that's what they used to say. People would say to me, like, even my guy friends, they'd be like, "Oh, you have a set of balls. You think you're a guy?" And I'm like, "But why? Just because I like things?" Like, there's so many different rules, and some of them are just nonsense. We're individuals. There's women who love football and beer, and there's men who don't. Right? It's just the way society is.
I feel like we're moving away from the book. So, but like this is a big.
But it's all important stuff.
I'm,
And yes,
actually, I'm curious. How do you think the sense of worthiness or not us in how we show up in the world gender wise?
well, I know for me, I always thought that men had more self worth, which is probably why I went that way. Because men in the 80s and 90s and 2000s had more power. They made more money. They got jobs easier. And it did look like an easier life, per se, to me. I'm not saying to everybody, but there was more of men get respected better. There was just a different view for me that I just thought you have more power as a man. Is that necessarily true? Probably not. Women have their own power, men have their own power, but it's how you view things. And I think part of it is how you're raised, part of it is what society looks like when you're raised and your own perspective on it. But I think if most people felt self worth and they had higher self worth, I don't know if we would look towards being like anybody else because we're tending to compare ourselves so much to others, which leads back to what you said in the beginning social media, all that FOMO, fear of missing out, comparing ourselves to others. It's causing us to feel more insecure, doubting ourselves and feeling unworthy. Because in the day, it was you compared yourself to celebrities. Now you're comparing yourself to the neighbor down your road who you went to high school with, who graduated college at the same time. And it's a really much harder time to feel self love when you're seeing everybody around you showing you their best selves, not even their reality, and you comparing yourself. So, yeah, it does play a huge role in it.
It does play a huge role in it. So I could talk to you for honestly, I could talk to you about this for hours. And clearly, we have a lot of shared experience and shared perspective. But like all good things, even there needs to be endings and beginnings. So I would make sure that people have a way to find you. You have some. How can they find you? How can they find your books? And we'll make sure it's in the podcast slash video blog notes. So don't freak out if you don't have a pen out there. How can people find you, Diane?
Well, one, thank you so much for having me, and I could talk to you for hours. We definitely have very similar backgrounds and experiences. But you can find me at my website, which is just my name, dianelang.org. My book is at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the typical book places. But thank you again. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah. Well, I had your book. I had your book. Here it is. I'm going to share your book on the screen so that my video editor doesn't have to. Here it is. You can see this the Amazon page, yeah?
Yep.
Worthy,
Thank
I
you
am
so
worthy,
much.
I am enough, I am loved. Available on Kindle and paperback. Hey, when are we going to hear this book on Audible?
I don't know. That hopefully soon I have to get in touch with my publisher about that.
I feel like if you read it, it would have so much power. So we're looking forward to that. And let me ask you the question I ask everyone at the end of the show is it's so funny. Like I haven't interviewed people in a while, so it's like I'm remembering how to do this. What is the legacy you want to leave behind?
Just that everybody knows that they have worth no matter what. Male, female, religion, race, it doesn't matter. We're all worthy, which is why we're here. We're put here for a purpose and a reason. I'm not going very religious. I have no religious background at all, but spiritually, there's a reason why everybody's here. And you're worthy no matter what anybody says. And if you feel unworthy at this moment, you can find your worth.
Oh, I can't leave that alone. Hey, some people make the argument that there's a hole in everybody that's God shaped. What do you think about this as a concept?
I don't know, to be honest. I just feel like I'll always have a hole because of trauma and things I've been through, but I feel like it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But I do feel that we all have a soul and that we're all connected, not just to a higher power, God or source, whatever you call it, but connected to each other, to nature, to animals, to plants. We're all the same. And I just wish we could. I mean, I'm wishing for something looking at the world today that doesn't seem like it's going to happen in the near future, but we all just knew that, it'd be a whole different world.
Well, I feel like that's a great answer, by the way. I feel like what you advocate for in the book, and I'm just going to wrap. I just want to make a plug for the book. One more plug for the book. I feel like what you advocate for in the book is that we seek out influences in our connection, right? That help affirm and fill the hole and help us grow, and that we move away from influences that port that support's almost the wrong word, that add to that sense of not enough. And there in our lives, we're going to come across people all day that are doing one of those two things. And it's just a matter they say you're only you grow as much, or you're only as motivated as the five top people in your life that you spend time with. So I'm really careful who you spend your time with. I think we all want someone to say things like your husband at the time did, which was, "Hey, why do you say that? Because I don't get that about you." Like that's the kind of people we want to have in our lives. I don't know how that worked out, but that was a great moment for him. Anyway,
Well, he's still here, so
all right. He was a keeper.
he's a keeper 28 years later. So
Thank you so much for your time, and maybe we'll do this again sometime.
I would love to. And thank you for having me.